Okay.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we are here with River. If you have not seen his latest piece in American Affairs, please go check it out. It is excellent. It is called The CIA and the New Dialect of Power, hence the name of this episode. And it talks about the CIA recruitment videos that we all kind of saw, made jokes about, etc. And so we're really excited to talk about it today. Welcome back on the show, River.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
So, do you want to give a quick rundown of what your argument was in this piece and what made you want to write the piece to begin with?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was incensed by a lot of people, both in the media and just like online, uh, putting forth this idea, as Natasha Leonard did and Intercept, that the CIA had co-opted woke language, and it just seemed to me to be totally false. And basically, the idea is that um, the CIA has like a history of it's not quite the conservative organization that people think that it is. It doesn't. It's not particularly opposed to cultural liberalism or anything like that. And um, the main point though is that the language that was used in those ads was targeted at a specific demographic. It's called the new dialect of power because this is the way that elites in our country speak. The sort of woke language, as you like to call it. I mean, that this isn't the language of the working class that it claims to represent. This is the language of elites. And the CIA is an elite institution. It recruits from elite colleges and universities. And so, in order to appeal to potential recruits, it's simply like speaking the language of the class of people who run it and the class of people that they want to recruit.
I like how in your piece you kind of put on the same graph two lines, right? And one is the rise of like woke language, and the other is the CIA's dabbling with leftist ideology or figures. And when you put them on the same graph as you do, you see that they follow a similar path. So it was only it becomes obvious that it was only a matter of time for those two lines to converge. And you lay that out very methodically in your piece. And once again, I hope that everyone goes to American Affairs and read your article, or go to your Twitter account at river_is_nice, which, as I advised Mila before starting the podcast, that you may want to get something, a Twitter handle, a little bit more easy to search for.
Or
But
not. That's why mine.
Yeah, I'm kind of I'm kind of like, I don't know at this
yeah,
point. I
right.
mean,
If you
It's
see
better to be
how
low follower.
River has
yeah,
too many haters to
I
make himself easy
do.
to
It's a
find.
new batch too every time.
It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it's like it's very ideal. It's a very ideologically diverse set of haters.
I
It's
know.
very fascinating.
Well, you
Yeah,
got
it's
into some
not.
shit last week with people I don't even know.
Well, yeah,
Um,
the right wing got mad at me last week, which is new because it's usually the left wing. But I guess like because like the left wing had gotten so mad at me, I had gotten all these like right wing followers, and I guess they thought that I was right wing, even though it's pretty clear that I'm not.
right.
Like I was like, they were like, you pretended to be a conservative. I was like, I was the most conservative person at a gay communist magazine. I don't know. Still
Like,
not.
yeah,
You know, I don't. Yeah.
that's where it's at. Yeah.
So, I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about one of those lines that I just pointed out, which is the CIA is kind of dabbling with leftism?
Um. So, well, they recruited Gloria Steinem. You want to go there? Um. I think I originally cited this, and then there's some stuff that we had to cut out. But she also tried to recruit Michael Harrington, the founder of the DSA, um, into into the CIA, and he didn't join. But the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which everybody knows about, is a lot of like left wing artists and writers got money from that. Some of them claim they didn't know who was funding it. It's neither here nor there, really. But if if they were getting money for a reason, so take
Yeah,
it with
and,
a
and
will.
and it's worth pointing out that the only reason he didn't join was because they didn't understand what point of order means, and they clapped with their hands. So-
Yeah, and
Point of privilege.
Gloria Steinem. I mean, I think people think of her now as being this like um sort of uber like DNC like libtard figure, and she kind of is, but she was also like on the board of the DSA until like 2017, when they like are an honorary board member, until they got rid of honorary board members. And the DSA attacked her, but not for being a CIA agent, which was known and which she's admitted and written about,
Did
but
they call
because
her
she said
TERF or
that,
something?
yeah, well, for like misogyny or something, like saying that the girls were just voting for Bernie instead of Hillary
the
because
boys.
with the
Yeah.
boys, yeah, like they wanted boyfriends, so they're voting for Bernie.
Oh, geez.
So
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are
and
kind of
it's
the
worth
vibes.
pointing out that was like after the DSA's like explosion into the mainstream in 2016.
right. Um, and I will say, like, as a caveat, like a lot of like really good artists got money from the Congress of Cultural Freedom. Even, I mean, I love Carson McCullers, and she helped found it. She was like an anti-communist, like insane kind of person, but she's a brilliant novelist, and like whatever, I'll still read her work. Like, but I mean, nonetheless, um, they did the CCF. They recruited Gloria Steinem, and basically what her job was to go to these like because it wasn't like a COINTELPRO thing, because like the CIA has always claimed they never meddle in domestic politics. They leave that to the FBI. But they basically sent her abroad to like these socialist organizations, um, abroad to rabble rouse and do some kind of like trot sort of stuff, anti-Soviet stuff. So I think they sent her to Switzerland and
You said
Finland, I think,
Helsinki, right? Yeah.
Helsinki.
Yeah.
And so, fueling the sort of like inter-left sort of what do you call it, like divisionalism that COINTELPRO did, but like they weren't opposed really to, like, she knew what she was doing, right? So and she thought she was on the right side of history, so they really did like fund this anti-Soviet like left. Things got out of hand, like when people start, the Weather Underground starts blowing up buildings or whatever, like a lot of that seemed to stop, but they were still hopeful. I cited one piece where it's not clear what their involvement was, but they were certainly happy about the um, the rise of the new French philosophers in France, pretty much like explicitly because like they were anti-communist, and because um, they weren't appealing to class, they were appealing to like these different sort of ideas. And so that's about as like far as I take it. I'm not I'm not trying to claim that the CIA like the CIA are leftist or something, but I do think that there was like something to be said for like the liberal anti-communism.
Mhm.
And I think that's more of what the CIA was, more than anything. A lot of people have taken issue with the fact that I said the CIA was never conservative. Uh, that's like the number one issue I've seen with the article. But what I mean by that is that they were never conservative in this sort of like Jerry Falwell type, like homegrown American values. Like we need to, maintain the family, and we need to maintain the, whatever. And it's certainly not like the Peter Hitchens type of, more high Tory right wingerism, or like the Pep Buchanan like anti-globalist conservatism. It's it's a sort of like liberal cosmopolitanism. These are people who spend most of their lives abroad. All of these people were like, they hired gay people. They like just drank all the time and like just partied and killed people. But they had this sort of like libertine kind of thing going on. These weren't conservative bumpkins running the show. They were just communists.
And I mean, I've argued in my article that kind of examined the incorporation of like intersectionality and wokeness into other the CIA as well, but other institutions of US imperial power, whether it be the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank or NATO or the US military. We just had that video, I don't know if you guys saw it, of a transgender high-ranking army official. I don't know exactly. Inaugurating a new naval vessel. So that was like last week. And then you have the defense contractors too, which are the mainstream media has celebrated that as like women taking over the world because they're in positions of power there. But all of this is kind of I argued that this was like a method of getting a larger pool of recruits. But I actually think that what you said last time you were on our show was even more insightful, which was that, and this is kind of a thread that runs through your recent piece, is that, using this language of wokeness and pivoting in that way is kind of a way for them to virtue signal basically to a higher class of recruits. They don't need young army guys that just want to sit in the chop hall and stuff their face and talk about the latest sports thing. They need like people that are interested in theory and critical analysis to wage a new kind of warfare, which is more hybrid in nature.
Right. Well, and they need they need people with highly specialized skills, linguistics, systems operating, like logistics, people who can code, like they don't need cannon fodder anymore, which is why I close with talking about Mark Milley, the high-ranking military guy. I forget what his position is now. It keeps changing, but saying like, I want to learn more about critical race theory, in like in a Senate confirmation hearing. And it's not just because they want people who are like interested in theory and all that type of stuff. It's just that as the old WASPy Northeastern boarding schools were like the center of like elite reproduction in the old days, it's the universities now. And that's just how people who go to these elite universities talk. And if that's the type of person you need, if you don't need the candidate fodder anymore, somebody who can like speak Farsi and operate a drone, then you need to go to Georgetown. And that's how people at Georgetown talk.
Yeah. Mark Milley was actually, I wrote about him in my article as well, because he was apparently reportedly tearful in meetings at the White House, warning that a U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan would turn women's rights back to the Stone Age. Meanwhile, he's high ranking in the U.S. military, which has dropped tens of thousands of bombs on Afghanistan over the past 20 years, turning it literally back to the Stone Age. But
Yeah.
it's funny to see him invoke that kind of rhetoric that's woke, both woke, but also like shows very explicitly the how hypocritical it all is.
Right. And like the elites like always have kind of done that. I mean, Laura Bush famously talked about women's rights in Afghanistan, how terrible the Taliban was to women. And Catherine Mooney, a congresswoman from New York, like showed up to Congress in a burqa. There was all like the pomp and circumstance to get us to invade Afghanistan in the first place on the basis of women's rights. And yeah, it doesn't seem like outside of the confines of like Kabul University, there was ever much progress on that front anyway.
Right.
And so yeah, for them to bring that up, it really is it is desperate, but it shows who they feel like they need to win the consent of, because all of these mostly working class people who in like especially in the early years of the war, like saw their friends and family members get blown up um in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, they don't care about women's rights in Afghanistan. Like, I mean, I'm sure that like most people will be like, yeah, they shouldn't beat women in the streets, but they're like, if it means sending my kid to die for it, like, no way. So they know who they have to appeal to, and it's not the working class.
Well, what I wonder is like, because I've kind of identified like two groups in this discourse, and like one, like, because at first when I watched these videos, I was kind of like, there's no way that anyone's genuinely moved by these. Like, it almost seemed like a joke. Like they're like waving it in your face, just going like, because like they just hit all the notes,
Yeah.
like they hit like it wasn't just like, oh, I'm a woman of color, I'm this and that. It's like, it was like, I'm a cis millennial with generalized anxiety disorder. Like, it was just everything. So it seemed a little bit ridiculous. So I guess like one thing I was wondering is like, is it actually appealing to anyone, or like what? Like, I'm actually confused about the purpose. And the second thing is like, I look at like that because I'm identifying like two groups. There's like the true believer liberals who genuinely like embrace all of this like idpol discourse and whatever. But then like there's also these leftists who like still very much believe in this like identity politics, but they're more like it's being co-opted. Like
Yeah.
it's like the intercept line, right? Where it's like, no, yeah, like this is a good way of speaking or looking at the world, but we don't like it when this institution does it. And so like it's strange to me, because then I'm like, is the function to undermine that group of people, or is the function, or like are they just no different than like the liberals who are the true believers as well? And like, are they just like deluding themselves by like trying to embrace more radical aesthetics than these liberals?
Well, they said I cited an article where the CIA like came to its own defense to Fox News and said that this had been like their best recruiting season and
That's
so many
crazy.
They've
years.
been doing well lately. Yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. They basically were saying that it worked. I don't know. I mean, they were liars, so
Yeah.
I don't know like if it actually is or not. I think that, well, I'll say this. I think that, the backlash was like pretty universal. Like, everybody was like, this is so over the top and goofy, especially, for the CIA. But I mean, like other company, like regular like tech companies and all sorts of, if the CIA wasn't recruiting people, like who would be? Those people are like talking the same way, like Google and Facebook and all them, like they're
Mhm.
doing the same thing where it's like a woman in a hijab with like a peg leg and she's like, I'm like non-binary and polyamorous and have anxiety disorders, like, and I work at Facebook. And it's like, okay. And apparently that works well for them. I mean, the pay probably also helps, but like, I mean, I think they're just like following suit, really.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe the backlash put them off to it. I don't know, but what was your question about the Intercept? All I'll say about that is, like, say what you will about Glenn Greenwald, but that if he was running that place still, that would not have ran.
Well,
Oh,
he
yeah.
was
He's
never
fallen out of some people's good graces lately, but he didn't do stupid shit like that. I'll give him that.
he was never running the place. I mean, the whole place was set up to take like a bunch of people from the New York Times and people
enough,
who actually could do like decent journalism and then pay them boatloads of money to do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think
But
Natasha Bertrand ever was doing great journalism. She was one of the Russiagate people, wasn't she?
Leonard, you're
Oh,
mixing
yeah,
up
yeah. Sorry.
Natasha Bertrand. But I
Sorry.
mean, fair enough. Like all these
Sorry,
people are
Natasha
like
Bertrand.
basically the same, right?
Right.
They're just carbon copies of each other, and one does Russiagate and the other does intersectional analysis. But all of it is useless. What I want to like kind of hit on the hypocrisy of all this, because on one hand you have these recruitment videos which are like appealing to these social justice minded youth. And then on the other hand, you have like what the CIA actually is. And I want to share a video that I took. I forget which year, but I'm gonna share it real quick so that we can watch it. This is John Kiriakou. He blew the whistle on torture at the CIA. What year was this? I shot this in 2017, and this is him. And I actually got in trouble for sharing this. I'll explain why later. But this is him talking about the morality at the CIA.
So he's been vetted and he's really great. So you're in this hotel room and you're meeting with him. And at the start of the meeting, he says, listen, before we meet...
He's talking from the perspective of a CIA agent.
I've given you everything. I've told you everything that's been true. You saved American lives. Now you're going to do something for me. You're going to go out and you're going to get me a prostitute right now, or I'm never cooperating with you again.
A CIA agent working with a source.
How many people would get him the prostitute? Some, not many. The answer is sure. I mean, he's a scumbag, of course, but your job is to deal with scumbags, and you would be expected to go out and get him the prostitute. What if he asks for a child prostitute? Absolutely not, under any circumstances. But that's not the CIA talking, that's John Kiriakou talking. Because there's no rule. Your job as a CIA case officer is to break the laws of the country that you're serving in. That's your job. Your job is to commit espionage, which in most countries is a death penalty crime. Your job is to convince people to commit treason for you because they like you so much, or they like the money that you're giving them so much. So, because it's the nature of your job to break the law, there are no rules that are written for you to carry out that job. Now, the problem there is that most CIA case officers would procure the child prostitute. And even if they felt funny about it, they would be told by headquarters, you have a job to do. This is a bona fide source here. Go do your job. That's the problem, or the nature of the problem, of ethics and intelligence operations. There are no ethics in intelligence operations. I've come to the conclusion after all these years that there probably doesn't need to be a CIA. I think
True. Yeah, that is wild, but not really surprising.
No, not at all. No, I mean, it's always like the ends justifying the means. And I mean, like, Christ only knows what they've done, I read a couple of like memoirs from people who were in the CIA when I was writing this, and they're all the missions they talk about have to be like very like vague. One of them actually had like retractions built into the autobiography, which was like kind of interesting.
Oh,
wow. Because she was like, I had the CIA review this before I published it.
It's a good narrative device. You have to fill in the blanks.
And then I think the other girl, Amaryllis Fox, I want to say that she like didn't do that and like got backlash for it or something. But whatever. She didn't reveal anything particularly interesting, so I mean, I don't know why anyone would be upset, but yeah, I don't know. With the child prostitute stuff, like, I mean, you that has to happen, right?
Well, I mean, that's what I think. I think this is why what you said is so important, because you said the CIA wasn't conservative, and neither were they really liberal. I mean, their ideology was advancing American power. So whether that means accepting homosexuality, which has been used to advance American power and attack other countries, or whether it means procuring child prostitutes, it doesn't matter. The goal is to advance American power and American foreign policy objectives. But actually, really quick aside, funny story with that video. I filmed it, and actually Julian Assange, he didn't retweet that one, but he retweeted the first part of the speech. That was the second part of the speech. But because he tweeted out the video, a lot of people saw it, and somebody copied my video, pasted the two parts together, and put it up on YouTube, and wrote former CIA officer exposes agency's child sex trafficking ring. And it fucking blew up. Like they thought he was saying like literally like most CIA officers would procure child prostitutes. So Fox News was contacting John Kiriakou about it, trying to get him to come on and discuss his explosive story more. I had to issue a DCMI or whatever it's called on YouTube and like correct the record for John because he was just getting hounded by right-wing media about this.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a good example of like not just the hypocrisy, but also like how there's no ethics, there's no moral code. It's not liberal or conservative. It's Americanism,
Yeah, and even the pro like CIA propaganda that you see, they always have to admit like it's not messy, but it's worth it. Like I cited, what was it? Zero Dark 30.
Yeah.
And like with that movie, I mostly use it as a device to like talk about like the way that it was all couched in like a sort of like professional class femininity, because like they use a woman and like she's like very pretty but also very tough, and she feels bad that she tortured people, but at the end they get Bin Laden, so it's worth it, right? And it's always like they're like, yeah, it's messy, it's bad out there, but they're doing it for you and it's worth it in the end. Like in the end they're this is hard on them, this is a sacrifice on them because they're doing it for the greater good. And that's really, I think that is like how a lot of them see themselves. Like nobody, like there's very few people who actually think that they're the villain,
Yeah, of course.
like most people want to,
and ironically now it's the conservatives who do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something that you I wonder if we can talk about that like shift that was kind of that came from like the Trump era. But really quick, I have to end the Twitter live stream. So I hope that you guys all join us on Rockfin. I hate giving this speech every time. But it's rockfin.com/prodempod. It's right at the bottom here, right here. Go there. Join us. More from River to come. You guys can. Yeah, so I mean, like that's the crazy part is like there was this like paradigm shift because, back in the day, like you talk to the liberals of the 1960s, and they hate the CIA, they hate the FBI, and then all of a sudden there was this like catalyzing event that caused this massive paradigm shift, and now it's the conservatives. I mean, that video I just played from 2017. That was conservative people who made that go viral, not liberals. So can you talk about why that was and like, I mean, I guess what's your take on that?
Well, I think that I really do think that it's like a class thing. I think that like as the um
Oh my god, I forgot
professional
to,
class has like shifted what?
I forgot to hit go live on Rockfin again. I said right before the stream, I'm pulling this up now so I don't forget.
Oh no.
And I didn't.
What
I
have
forgot
you
again. So
done?
I know I'm like the worst person to host a podcast ever. I'm so absent-minded, and I get so caught up in these thrilling conversations. So I guess if you're joining us on Rockfin, which I highly doubt, then you can go to the beginning or just watch from here. But the whole thing will be up. I'm just again, I apologize to our viewers, especially our subscribers. I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna like beat myself after. I'm gonna do like a whole Catholic.
You're
You
gonna go
said
to
before we started, you're
confession.
like, okay, I gotta go live on Rockfed.
I know, and so after the show, I'm gonna convert to Catholicism and just like start whipping myself in the back.
Oh my god.
Oh.
Yeah. I can
Anyway.
help. No.
Yeah, Mila's mad at me.
I can help convert you. I mean, no, I'm just kidding.
What were we talking about?
What were we talking about? Oh, well, I was just like, I guess like, because
you were saying something about the conservatives, I think, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
I was asking you your take on that paradigm shift, and I don't just mean like what caused it. I think we all kind of know that Donald Trump and the intelligence agencies kind of undermining him, both the FBI and CIA undermining him. Basically, the whole national security establishment was against him. So I understand that, but how? To me, it's shocking that like there was just a complete 180 from both the liberal and conservative sides of the public on how the intelligence agencies are viewed, and it was like really like it happened so easily, right? So I was wondering what your take is on that.
Well, I think that it's part of it is the Trump thing. Part of it is I think the realignment of these what I like to call privately like the spook districts in like Northern Virginia and Maryland, from like the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Because like if you look at into like statistics, which like it's almost impossible to find like really good like information on how people view the CIA, but like a good proxy is like what do you think about the JFK assassination? You know, and like the only demographic in the United States that thinks that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone is college educated whites, and they've gone increasingly to the left. So I think it's kind of like a class issue. I think that it's like you know, the number of people who are like truly invested in like the honor of like the CIA or like the national security state, it's like a few thousand people in this country. Like, let's be honest. The military, that's a different story because so many people are involved in all these like complicated ways. But like when it comes to like the NSA, when it comes to the CIA, I feel like the average American like assumes that those people are bad.
Yeah.
You know, and really like when you're talking about like defending when you're like defending them, like you're speaking to like a very specific audience of people who are truly bought into the system in like the most sincere way.
Like you said in your article, people who watch CNN like other people watch ESPN. That was a great line.
Right.
Those
yeah,
people.
People who are like truly invested in like who have benefited from not just like America like being a dominant power, because you can kind of argue that like we all have in like one way or another, like, you know, because we can buy like cheap shit from China or like whatever. But people who like you know, we didn't stay in Afghanistan to like placate the left or the right. We did it to placate like a few thousand people in Northern Virginia,
Arlington. Yeah.
DC, you know, like those are the people who benefit from empire in the most direct way. And I think that when you're talking to those people, it's like, yeah, when the war started, they were on the right because the people starting the war were on the right. I mean, the people on the left were kind of the Democrats helped, but like if there was like you had a handful of Democrats, at least with the Iraq War, who were like, no, we're not along with this, and the base of the Democratic Party didn't, to their credit, was against the war for the most part, like the most diehard like left of the base of the Democratic Party. But now the Democrats are like the more competent administrators of empire. Republicans tend to either be bumbling or isolationists increasingly, which I think is a positive movement.
Yeah, there's like some that still like something that kind of threw a wrench in that for me was the Soleimani assassination. Because like all of a sudden you saw like a Republican government just like cheer that on, and I kind of wondered if it was because you could still technically maintain, like it's like they're kind of having their cake and eating it too, because they're like, oh well, we're not going into Iran, like we're not going to war with Iran, we're just killing a bad guy. And so they get to like satiate the base's like hunger for like hating the bad men, because it's like a rally around the flag effect, right? But at the same time it's like, oh, but we're not wasting like that many resources. And I think like I don't know. That's why, I'm still like, I would agree. I think that the Democrats are like much worse in right now with respect to like this kind of thing. But I do think that like I kind of worry sometimes that it goes under the radar now when like
Yeah, no, you're right. I think when it comes to Iran, that's a particular thing that the right wing is still very focused on. I think it's because of Israel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not like,
good point.
I'm not saying like Zionist Jewish conspiracy or whatever. It's mostly like the people who
you can say
raised
that.
me, to be honest. It's like
I give you a
the
pass.
Christian evangelicals who like are like, well, we have to have this weird apocalyptic war so Jesus can come back. So,
deal with it.
Yeah, so you're just gonna deal with it. We're gonna assassinate political leaders in Iran.
Well,
and I think that like Pompeo was probably involved in that somehow. Maybe I could be wrong about that.
I
But
know
like,
he definitely, I think he was, because he was Pompeo is the guy who meets with all the like dissidents, the totally organic Iranian dissidents, and like
the MEK, yeah.
Yeah, the MEK and like
right. But like, with I would say that on foreign policy, like the Trump administration was an improvement over the Obama administration, which seemed like totally hyper focus in this insane Aspergian way on just like toppling every like secular government in the Middle East.
Libya on its own, I think, was like one of the biggest crimes that I've seen committed by the US government. I mean, you had the most prosperous country in Africa. There's a little bit of an irony in like the first Black president of the US destroying the most prosperous country in Africa and like enacting slavery. But
certainly one of the biggest crimes of our lifetime. But I would say that the Trump foreign policy was like, it was totally schizophrenic, right? Because on one hand you have the Democrats accusing him of being soft on Russia, and on the other hand, they were doing more military exercises on Russia's border than Obama was doing. And then there's the Israel issue, but I will say that, to the credit of some on the right, not everybody was happy about Soleimani being killed on the right. And Iran is a big blind spot. You look at somebody like Mike Cernovich, or Cernovic, however you say his name, who is generally putting out an anti-war line. He's very hawkish on Iran and China. Iran and China are really the two issues that, and why is that? Because it's blind loyalty to whatever Trump does. He pulled out of the JCPOA. So like, if you had told me in 2016 that Republicans would be better on North Korea than Democrats, I would have called you crazy. But not everybody is Mike Cernovich. There were people on the right that were against that are even against Israel, or not necessarily against Israel, but against the massive amounts of military funding that the United States props up that regime with. So, it's going to be interesting. We talked about this before about what it would be like to see Trump run against Mike Pompeo, and I would like to see it. And I think Trump would win, first of all, because Pompeo is totally uncharismatic and, concerned with all these high level foreign policy issues that Trump is just like, why? That's the appeal of Trump. He hears all this swamp speak and then he's just like, why? But like, I don't understand. Like, what was it the other, who was it it was Tucker Carlson who was interviewing some representative, and Tucker just kept asking him, why are we taking Ukraine's side over Russia? Why? And he couldn't give it a straightforward answer as to why that is beneficial for the American public. And so I think that's the Trump approach and why he's appealing. But again, swamp creatures throughout his administration that I think maybe not. Maybe he's just like a totally schizophrenic guy,
Well, the problem to me with foreign policy seems to be that like everybody realizes something was bad like way after the fact. So like now, like most normal people acknowledge that Iraq was a disaster. And so like when we say like, okay, like these conservatives, like they're good on everything except for Iran and China. Well, like same with a lot of the left too.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the left is bad on China or even Iran in some cases, and it's just kind of like it's because like no one is really like, not a lot of people just aren't good on these things until like way after, because now a lot of conservatives are like saying like, yeah, Iraq was actually a disaster, like Syria, yeah, like Syria is a case where both the left and the right have been frankly like pretty terrible. And like you don't really see like what was good about Trump in that case was Trump was like straight up about his intentions. Like he didn't pretend it was about human rights. He was just like, yeah, I'm there for the oil. And like, I mean, in a sense, like that's good, right? Like it's not good that he's there, but it's good that he was frank about it. And that's kind of what makes the Democrats more insidious, is because like they're less bumbling, as River said. Like they have this like very neatly packaged, ready to go rhetoric. And they're like that with Libya too. Like they had that whole Viagra story, like, oh my God, like, and it's still outrageous, but it's like they have an explanation that's beyond, this like rah, we're there for the oil kind of thing.
And I think that a lot of the China stuff is just, well, one, it's like an excuse to like just have ships like mindlessly droning around the South China Sea, and to spend a bunch of money doing that. But I think more it's just like a rhetorical device. It's like the sort of like threat of like Islamism is like kind of like over. I mean, it's not over, but it's like not in the news anymore. And there's like, ISIS is basically gone. And so they have to have like a new boogeyman, but it's like, it's never going to be the Cold War, because like the Soviet Union wasn't like one of our largest trading partners.
Yeah.
Like if we went to war with China, both of our economies would collapse immediately. And it's not just because we buy a bunch of stuff from them. It's like they also buy a bunch of stuff from us. They buy about like our agricultural economy would collapse.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to recognize that the Cold War wasn't a hot war. It's literally called a Cold War, right? So to say it's not a new Cold War is like saying that there wouldn't be, pretty close to full-scale hybrid warfare. And I would say that already there is. There's a lot of economic ties that get in the way of. There's economic ties, but there's all these Cold War scenarios in the South China Seas, for example. So, and the thing is China's economy is overtaking ours, and the empire's. In my view, the empire is going to lash out as it falls. So. So, we could, I don't want to, argue with you, River, but I have a slightly different analysis.
No, I see what you mean. I just mean, like, what I mean by that is, like, I don't think that there's going to be situations like we had in the Cold War where, like, the United States
Cuban
government
Missile Crisis
almost started like a nuclear war with,
right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that, like, the threat of actual physical violent war is going to be quite as prevalent as it was with the Soviet Union, where at times it seemed like there could actually be like a full-scale war.
Hot war, yeah. I agree with that. With that. We got kind of off track, but there's something that is kind of tangential. Who's this guy? Richard Hernania, or I don't know how to say his name.
Yeah.
I don't even really know who he is, but he has some good tweets sometimes.
The Cato guy. Is he with Cato?
Is he Cato? Oh, geez. I'm praising a Cato guy. Well, anyways, he had a good tweet.
Published in Cato, so don't worry, no one's perfect.
But he tweeted a picture of like some it was Huawei welcoming back what's her name? Meng.
Yeah.
The woman who was imprisoned in Canada that was like was she like VP of Huawei? I'm probably getting all these kind of facts wrong, but it was hilarious because he was like, wow, it's a tech company and there's not all these people with colorful hair and how they were dressed in suits, and like how different is that from a US tech company, which I feel like kind of fits with the topic of today.
Yeah. I've also written like I've also written an article about that in TwinkRev called The Banal Decadence of the Liberal Elite, which people should check out. It's very good.
That is a good article, yeah.
It was very fun, which I sort of bemoan as being like presided over by like just our entire lives and economies being run by like autistic guys in gray hoodies. It's very dire, Oof. It doesn't quite hit the same as like the stoic like Mad Men type suited freaks that used to run the show. At least there's some dignity in that,
Yeah, that's interesting. I just saw a comment about Enosh Cantor of the Celtics. And like I don't know if you guys know about him, but he's been like playing like he's like he's taking a stab at some like activism, and he's like an NBA player, kind of a subpar NBA player, but he like I think this is partially like the NBA's fault for like making everything political and everyone's like an activist brand, but like he wears like these shoes that like for like China is like murdering the Uyghurs or like free Tibet and stuff like that. And it's just
that guy's a total asset. I'm not putting this in an article, so I can say my opinions here without having to fully back them up. But that guy was sitting with Fethullah Gulen on the night of the coup in Turkey, like watching the TV. He's a Gulenist. And if you go to the Radio Free Asia's Uyghur page, you can see that they're retweeting him. So I'll also point out that back maybe 6 months ago, all these NED funded groups came together with basically a plan to undermine the Beijing Olympics this winter. And part of that plan was to recruit U.S. athletes to be outspoken as they were, with Black Lives Matter. So it's all following the script. Obviously I can't prove that he's an asset, but it certainly seems so.
I thought he was just like jealous of LeBron, and so he was just being like, because like everyone's mad at LeBron about China, and like,
Yeah, well, it doesn't quite hit the same. I don't think Nike's gonna give him a deal because like where are those shoes made? Sorry, like
true. Yeah, it's interesting. I actually like to bring it back to kind of like the idea of like CIA and wokeness and what you're saying about Richard Hanania's tweet. Like there was this bit on Tucker Carlson where Tucker was like praising China like pretty heavily, and I was like I was surprised to see like a conservative network praising them because the rest of like Trump's crew is kind of more anti-China. But Tucker was like, one of the things that he brought up was like how China wants to like limit worship of like sissy celebrities.
Yeah, I mean, culturally masculinity is still it's not canceled yet, right?
Yeah,
they don't want to turn into South Korea, where like where like every male celebrity looks like a Sailor Moon character at 35. I don't blame them.
I don't know much about that, but I just like I thought that was very entertaining. I was like, wow, okay, didn't think of that because it's kind of like it's like how everyone used to be like very like a lot of people on the right were very Islamophobic, and then now suddenly they're like base Taliban, like they're not, the Taliban's not woke, so they're great,
Well, I saw this one joke tweet. It was like no Taliban ever called me an incel. But yeah. I think with Tucker, when he praises China, because he's talked about their military and compared it to our military, in regards to the masculinity versus sissy dichotomy. I think what he's doing is praising China as a strong adversary. So it's not like coming from necessarily like a place of like wanting peace or non-hostility.
Right. Yeah.
Right, but it's also I think it's also just like it's playing into like the culture war thing where like it's like the yellow peril, but like kind of in reverse, where instead of like it's men in ponytails coming over to like rape your women or whatever, it's like the men in ponytails are here and like if we don't like get them back into shape, then these hot like masculine Chinese guys are gonna overtake Ohio or whatever. I mean it's very silly. I mean, like, far be it from a gay guy to like bemoan the decline of masculinity. I do it a lot, but like, I mean, it is like jarring to see straight guys do it. Like, what was that guy's name? The senator from Missouri, the one that's clearly gay. Holly, yeah.
Is he clearly gay? You think so?
I mean,
he sets off your gaydar.
Yeah. And I also saw a picture of him kissing his wife, where he's like,
I can't argue with an expert.
It was like, okay. And he had like a weird picture like in his, I heard he had like a weird picture in his dorm room in college of just like a shirtless man holding a baby, and it was like, yeah, there's like, well, like he's gay, but it's like you should see a therapist, like not for like conversion therapy reasons, but like to come to terms with it. So you don't express it in these weird ways, like going on Tucker Carlson and talking about masculinity, or getting like a stock photo of a naked man holding a baby and hanging it up in your dorm room. That's not a healthy way.
And so he's kind of like a callback to like the 90s Republicans, because he's involved with like the Family Research Foundation, Blackstone Legal Group. This is something I've written about with him because it was tangential to a story I was doing. But yeah, he's pretty. I'm sure there's more specifics about like what he's actually said and tried to legislate, but he's advanced what we would call an anti-gay agenda, right?
Yeah, I think vaguely. I mean, it's not real. Like the anti-gay thing doesn't really, you know, it's not the same like pastiche anymore. Like
Doesn't hit like it used
everybody's like
to.
anti-trans now. Like that's the very cool thing to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, like the only times that I've felt like anti-trans is like on Twitter, and I feel like that's a bad example. It's like you just have like too many mentally ill people on Twitter of like any specific type, and so I think that like drives some people crazy. But like
Mhm.
and like actual trans people in like real life are fine, and like I don't get what all
Yeah.
the insanity is about. Trans Twitter do be
Yeah.
crazy though.
Yeah, I mean, there's just communities, like there's pockets of people on Twitter, usually like the ones with anime profile pictures that like they just are unhinged, and you just have to deal with that.
Yeah, gay
But
Twitter used to be like that too, but like now they're just all they don't care anymore.
No, they're too busy. Well, I'm not going to say
thinking
that.
about Josh Hawley.
Yeah.
Yeah. he's
They're too
like
busy
the
sliding into his DMs, yeah. But yeah, no, I think that like no, culture war is always like it's a good it's a good thing to like go to. And I think like that's mostly what's happening with like Tucker, because like Tucker is I find his show compelling because he's like one of the only ones who's willing to deviate from whatever like the talking points of the day might be, but he's also like he's a chameleon. Like he's been a million different things. He was a neocon, then he was a libertarian.
He tried to get into
now
the
he's this-
CIA.
yeah.
He was
Wait, he tried to
turned
get into
down.
the CIA? Is that what you
He was
said?
turned down, yeah.
Oh, really? That's
Really?
humiliating.
That's really funny.
But yeah, he's just one of those he's one of those people who really knows how to like be slightly ahead of like the moment of wherever the wherever the right wing is. He's like Ann Coulter in that way.
Yeah.
Who I
Yeah.
also kind of find fascinating for slightly different reasons.
I
He's
was very fascinated with her, to be honest.
You know,
when
she
was-
like I heard the other day that like she was gonna run for like Senate or something in Connecticut, which she
Mhm.
would have lost, but okay.
Connecticut.
But in Connecticut, I was like, okay. Put on a cowboy hat, girl, and like move to Georgia or something. Like, give yourself a fighting chance. But she like refused to do it because she would have to reveal her age in like the forms. So she
That's
refused to run,
amazing.
and I was like, "That's so cool."
I mean, you could probably find her age from like voter files at least.
Well, I think she like did something where she like had her birthday changed or something. It's like it was like it was a whole weird psychotic thing that she did that endeared me to her.
Honestly, kind of respect. Like,
but yeah, she was way ahead of. She's always been ahead of the curve. She was the one saying like Mexicans are rapists like a year before Trump said it.
Yeah.
I mean, she was like the first one to be like Trump is over.
yeah, I remember that. Like, she declared it.
What was the thing that he did that sparked that? Do you remember?
I think he like didn't build the wall. Like that was
yeah.
He didn't build the wall, and I think it had something. I think there was some foreign policy stuff that she was also upset with, but I can't remember.
Yeah, there's something like that. I remember. Like, my favorite thing from her is she wrote this article about why soccer, like Americans shouldn't watch soccer because it's like fundamentally communist.
I mean,
I
I
don't
think
we should
there's
watch
like
soccer either, but it's also because it's so boring. It's so long. Like people only score like 5 points the whole game. I'm like, I just can't.
That's
do it.
generous to even say 5 points. It's usually like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that soccer is like the only sport that I ever really enjoyed playing. I mean, hockey too. Hockey, I mean, it's a team sport, right? You know, it's and so I can actually kind of sympathize with that view that it's more communist than maybe baseball or American
Maybe she
football.
was thinking of Maradona, who was like very communist, you know.
I don't know what that is.
No, the soccer player. He was like tight with like Fidel Castro. And
Right.
Well,
That's
it
right.
does feel very European, and I've like all long been on like a tirade against like the influence of like European culture in the United States, which it always ends up being corrupted and also like only reaches like a very annoying subset of people, much like the ones I've described in my article. Like, remember it's like called like Haig or something. It's like some Danish thing where it's like it just means like comfy or something like that. But it's basically when you have an empty apartment with like an Afghan and like and like a fire and like pastries, like really like precisely made pastries, and you just eat them and you drink. It's like very much, it's like the IKEA, if like IKEA, like high quality IKEA type thing. And I find it so repulsive. I'm like, when I go over to your house, it should be just like covered in cheap trash, and like you should have like photos of your family up somewhere. Like, I don't know, like it just feels un-American to me, and it doesn't feel cozy. It feels alienating and strange.
Let me play this clip. I got a clip I want to share. This is from one of my favorite shows.
Bobby, I didn't think I'd ever need to tell you this, but I would be a bad parent if I didn't. Soccer was invented by European ladies to keep them busy while their husbands did the cooking.
Why do you have to say what you don't understand?
I don't hate you, Bobby.
I meant soccer.
Oh, you hate soccer, yes.
So we won't expect the CIA to embrace soccer, I guess.
No.
I guess like one thing that I was thinking of, like that you mentioned earlier, is like how they kind of use every sort of language except for like class. But I have kind of noticed that there is like, I don't know about CIA per se, but like in that sort of like leftist canon, there is an appeal to class, but like it's usually through like, it's still kind of more of a culture war critique than like a material one, because it's like about the aesthetics of class. Like it's like about classism, you know, and it's like you just end up like getting mad at like college kids for buying like Salvation Army stuff because they're being like, don't appropriate my culture or whatever. But like,
Is that a thing?
Yeah,
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, or they say don't buy it because like fat people need places to shop or whatever.
And Salvation Army is a place for fat people.
No, because they're saying like a lot of like
that's
thin
fatphobic.
women.
Yeah.
They were saying a lot of thin women go and buy like oversized stuff from like Salvation Army or whatever, or thrift stores.
I shopped at Salvation Army during the 4 months I spent in college.
Yeah.
But I that was all I could afford, so.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, honestly, like, to say I do find some of it annoying because it doesn't look good, but it's become like countercultural and cool. Like, what is Kamala's stepdaughter? Whatever her name is.
The McPoyle.
Yeah, she looks like a fucking McPoyle.
That's like all I can think about.
And I'm like, you're rich, you shouldn't be dressing like this. And I was like, also, poor people don't even dress like that because, like, I mean, globalization has wrought like terrible things on this country, but it is like you can buy a shirt at H&M for like $3, or like, yeah, H&M is so cheap now. It's like insane. Like you can buy like, I mean, clothes for like pretty cheap. And it's honestly like the hood rich thing of like, I mean, it's honestly like the whole no logo thing anyway. That was always like a sort of like upper middle class, like graduate student, like the whole like Everlane like sort of thing where it's just like a very basic clothings with no labels on them or whatever. Like that was always more of like an upper middle class thing anyway, because like working class and like middle class kids, like they're wearing like Puma or like Nike or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, you save up your money from McDonald's and you go buy like a pair of Jordans or Nikes or whatever. And like, that's because it makes you happy. 'Cause it's, like,
Yeah.
the only thing that you can buy, like, that I mean, that is what, like, globalization gave Americans. It's like you're gonna die of a heroin overdose because you have no prospects, but you'll die in a pair of Jordans,
Yeah.
you know?
That's
Um,
bleak.
because you can afford like, that's you can afford these, like, kind of basic pleasures. I mean, not like, if you wanna get, like, Gucci or something, like, maybe not that. That's still sort of, a little bit, like, upper class, kind of. Um, but I feel like that even is, like, passé for them now, you know?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like I guess like what I'm wondering is like, is the next CIA ad gonna be also like, not just talking about racism and sexism, but like classism as well? Because like I can't really think of why they wouldn't have an interest in talking about class as long as it remains superficial. Like as
Yeah.
long as it's
Right.
not like, yeah, like we're gonna like give like
Well,
the word
Netflix is doing it, right?
yeah.
JD Vance, that horrible JD Vance movie that Glenn Close did a marvelous job in. Like,
What movie is that?
Hillbilly
Yeah,
Elegy.
yeah. I haven't seen
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah. Well, it should have just been a movie about Glenn Close and Amy Adams, and that would have been actually probably compelling because she does look like every Southern grandma. Like, she looked like my grandma. Like, I was like it was a compelling performance from her, but the rest of the movie, it was just a terrible movie. Um, and I also read that book, but the guy who wrote Hillbilly Elegy, JD Vance, he got very popular. Um, and he works for like Thiel Capital, and he like ran for Senate in Ohio and like lost terribly.
Gotcha.
But his whole thing was like basically being like the white trash guy that like liberals can sympathize with. Um, or not even really just liberals, but like wealthy people, because he's like, it's all just like, you just have to get through it. And we don't like being called rednecks, which I'm like, I've literally never heard that. Um, but he's like, yeah, there's like classism and stuff, but you just have to work through it. And it's like, it's the whole bringing it back to classism, which has never been the problem,
Mhm.
you know?
Right.
Like it's not hard to change your accent. Like, I've more or less done it. Like, it's not hard to like, there are like some superficial kind of things that people will like judge you for, but it's usually not even class based. It's more like regional. Like, if you have like a really thick Southern accent, like I've been made fun of for that, but like I've never like, um, but it's not, because class is like kind of this thing that it's hard to tell exactly unless you're like homeless poor, like, where you
Right.
can just see it on you. You can kind of navigate through. It's the, it's the structural sort of like thing where it's like, okay, if you don't have any money to go to college, then you're going to be in debt. And if you don't end up working for, Teal Capital,
Yeah,
then
well, like
you're gonna have to
the
pay all that off, and like so it like restricts mobility and like blah blah blah. There's no you and that's really your only option, because if there's no like industrial labor for you to really go to where you can just not go to college and like have a good job. um
Yeah.
so
well, like the last concern of like poor people is microaggressions, right?
mhm.
Like nobody cares. Like the people, if you're poor, you're poor. Like it's I'm much more concerned about what I'm having for dinner than whether somebody you know makes fun of me. You know, um, but I think that the next CIA recruitment ad could be superficially about class. And you mentioned JD Vance, who's on the right, but there's like a left wing doing that too. And Netflix, look no further than Netflix, where like every original series is like vaguely anti-capitalist. Look at movies
Mhm.
like Parasite, the series Squid Games, both from South Korea. um it's weird.
Mhm.
You'd think that like South Koreans would have like more more concrete gripes with capitalism, given how fucked up their society is, both culturally and economically. Culturally as a result of the economics. But I mean, everything's vaguely anti-capitalist now.
Mhm.
Coming from, one of the, most valuable companies in the world, staffed with, a lot of these pink-haired creatures of wokeness. So,
Right. Well, you
if the
always have to
companies are doing it, then
Well, you always have to, like, give things, a hearing, and, like, I mean, art is complicated, whether it's good art or bad art, but, like I talked about Carson McCullers earlier, she helped f like, found the, Congress for Cultural Freedom, and she was from the South, she was from Columbus, Georgia, but she was from, like, an old planter class family, like, she didn't grow up poor, but you know, if you read her books, if you read like The Heart of the Lonely Hunter, there's like, um, she does like, give people a hearing, and she does talk about how people look down on black people. They look down on like, the poor, like white trash. She makes the communist character like a drunk and like an ingrate, but like she does like show like sympathy um for people and their like hardships as they're like confessing them to this deaf guy who can't really talk back, and he's just like a vector for all of their concerns and their gripes and their hardships, and it's compelling art and you can't deny it. Just like, I mean, I don't think it's like, I don't think Squid Game is like compelling in the same way that Carson McCullers is, but it has something to say, but it doesn't have like a solution because it's because it's art, it's narrative, and also like, I mean, if it just turned like full Leninist, like we need to organize
Sure.
the workers or whatever, then I don't think they would run it, but I don't think it would be like good art. Like, have you seen like they also have Snowpiercer on Netflix? Have you seen that?
No, I don't watch any of this shit.
No,
I'm just
Snowpiercer.
ripping.
So Snowpiercer is based on the graphic novel by a French guy who I think was actually a communist, and it's a very communist film. Tilda Swinton is in it. She plays this character who's supposed to be basically like a stand-in for like Margaret Thatcher with like a dash of Mussolini, and she's kind of like the villain, and it's all these people, it's the end of the world, like some sort of climate catastrophe has happened, all the survivors of Earth are on this train that's circling the Earth endlessly, and they have the poor people in the back. In the middle they have this sort of decadent, supposedly, like I think it's supposed to be a stand-in for the middle class, and at the front of the train they have like the real elites who are just hedonistic, like they're just like doing drugs and having orgies, and at the top is just this mild-mannered man in a suit who oversees the whole thing. And inside of the front, in the caboose or whatever, he lifts up the thing, and it's just these kids who are like putting this goo and like turning these things because like they've run out of parts on the machine, and so the kids just have to turn the machine. And he was like, that's why the people at the back of the train exist. It's basically to have children because they're the only ones small enough to make the machine going, to keep the machine going. And it's obviously it's so heavy-handed that it almost makes it bad.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
But like, but it's still like a pretty good movie. Like the performances are great. Like it's not a terrible concept, and but it's not going to start a revolution. I'm very pessimistic about like the political power of art, which is why I think the CIA isn't as smart as I think they are. I think that the stuff that they did with that Gloria Steinem, like actually sending people to like go in and wreck the infrastructure, was way more compelling and like or not compelling, but way more useful than like the Congress for Cultural Freedom or any of that shit ever was.
Yeah, I would agree. And like there's definitely like I think also what is effective though is like the theory that was produced, like if you look at like even like I read like Marcuse and I was like, oh yeah, this is good, whatever, and then it turns out he was like a CIA asset. And I think there's like a kind of like success in like leftist anti-communist theory, like if that you know, I do think they are like culturally successful in that respect, but it is definitely all culture war.
Yeah.
So.
Well, with the theorists, with like Marcuse and like all of them, I think that's a little bit more direct because he's speaking directly to the issues. You know, with novels and movies or
Jackson
whatever,
Pollock.
that's a bit more diffused. Of course, you did have like just straight up anti-communist like popular culture, you know, like Red Dawn or whatever in like the 80s, but the CIA didn't even have to fund that, you know, because it was just
Right.
you know, it's like a dumb action movie that everybody will see and like will make a lot of money. And who knows? I mean, maybe the CIA funded stuff like that, but you know, they didn't really have to because that's just that's where like the culture was.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna wrap up.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, River, thanks so much for joining us. River is nice. It's on Twitter at River_is_nice. Once again, small piece of advice. Well, I guess you probably want to remain.
Don't send him more harassment.
Undiscoverable. I've been, man, I got like 70 notifications on Twitter right now because I tweeted some shit about Chomsky.
But you gotta make it private for that.
I always try to drum up a little controversy before our episodes just to like get some eyes on it. But you know, once again, I apologize to our Rockfin subscribers. I'm gonna try to do better about that.
Better.
I know. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, River. Check out his article on American Affairs. It's a wonderful read. Very well put together.
I sent it to so many people.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And we look forward to hearing more from River in the future. Probably somebody that we will have on again and whose work we'll continue to keep our eyes on. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next week.